Greetings, Neo-Swedenborgians. It is Saturday morning, and I have a different edition of this book. I have the 1917 edition of J. Hewitt Mackenzie, Spirit Intercourse, page 195. He says, "At first, the student may find himself particularly sensitive to the influence of those with whom he comes daily in contact, and this indicates that care should be taken until such time as he has learned fully to control his being by the development of his mental and spiritual powers. Otherwise, he is likely to be overborne by opposing influences. Students should therefore treat themselves very much as a young and growing plant is treated, sheltered from the frost and the blasts of the violent wind for a time, but which, once it is firmly rooted and has begun to grow, expand and flourish, may be transplanted or allowed to stand the full blast of the outer atmosphere. Only those who are prepared to sacrifice time and effort upon themselves with the sole object of learning how to benefit others can ever hope to succeed in helping humanity into that perfection of bloom which men call beauty, love, and wisdom." So there's J. Hewitt Mackenzie. Now, to those of you, which is essentially everyone, who are new to Neo-Swedenborgianism, let me connect this book, which I quoted in episode number 1, let me connect this book to everything else. And I coined a new little phrase yesterday, which is, at this time where there's all this talk about post-modernism, and without getting into that, I would like to suggest that there is a new thing, which is we have the pre-modern era, we have the modern era, we have the post-modern era, and now I think we're getting something of a re-modern era. So there's a lot of people who are kind of leaving postmodernism, and they're going back to just what would be called simple modernism. So they're kind of, but they've been down that path. So they're not exactly just modern types. They're re-modern. So there's pre-modern, modern, postmodern, and re-modern. So I just coined that myself yesterday, and maybe someone else has too, but who knows. But anyway, so the re-modern era is beginning. And the re-modern era is represented by the idea that we're actually not outside observers. We are within this system in some way. And what I've said in the past is that this whole near-death experience could be seen as a shutdown mechanism for our psyche, basically. Your heart stops, your attention turns out from outside to inside, and you descend into this world of your own making, right? So Neo-Swedenborgianism is not mystical, it is physiological. But then within that world, once you turn and enter it, it is essentially just like a mystical world. So what we have to connect it with this is that we have three sources, three literature sources that we're drawing from. We're drawing from the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg from the 1700s. That's a primary source. But his writings inspired this whole generation of these writers, which are spiritualist writers. There's this guy, J. Hewitt Mackenzie, there's Francesco, I've listed them elsewhere, but anyway. Francesco, Wanderer in the Spirit Lands. Start with that one. You can find it online in its entirety, the whole book, because it's from it's public domain. So anyway, the three sources, all right? There's Swedenborg himself, first generation, primary source. And then we have the near-death experience people who are happening every day now. There's always a new one, because it's a physiological process, and it's just being examined now. So those are both primary sources, and they're both extremely compelling reading. Whether you want to believe whatever you want to believe, it's the near-death experience, for example, are compelling readings, because what will happen sometimes in them is like the person's like, well, I was in my raft on the river, and something happens that actually kills them almost. So you have this whole adventure, and then you have this spirit adventure. So it's fun to read anyway. So the two primary sources, we have Swedenborg's own writings, which what I'm saying is that he traveled within his own psyche, and that these people with a near-death experience, they also are traveling within their own psyche. It's a physiological process, right? But what's it like? You read him, you read them, it ends up being similar to the spiritualist universe from the 1800s. So like today we can talk about the Star Wars universe or the Star Trek universe, and you know, Obi-Wan Kenobi is not going to be on Star Trek because they live in two different universes, so to speak, right? Well, back in the 1800s, there was this development of this whole spiritualist kind of idea, and it is a direct reaction from people reading Swedenborg. A whole generation of people read Swedenborg, brought all these ideas to their imaginations. They explored these ideas, and it becomes this somewhat coherent world. And we can explore it with the assumption that we may enter it in our own self someday. As I've said in the past, the bad news of Neo-Swedenborgianism is that you have a 10% chance of entering into this type of realm, and there's nothing you can do to get out of that 10% chance. Now that means you have a 90% chance of experiencing nothingness, and so odds are on that. But the thing is, if you enter nothingness, there's no way of knowing about it, right? So it's this other kind of twist of the knife, which is that okay, you have a 90% chance of entering nothingness. You only have a 10% chance of entering into this near-death experience type world. But you only can actually experience this one, because the other one you don't experience. So you're either going to disappear into nothingness, or you're going to have one of these things, right? And the one is you can't experience, and the other you can't. Anyway, so there you go. A little actual blah-de-blah on the subject of Neo-Swedenborgianism. Thanks. See ya.